Hey, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major auto podcatchers, and Odyssey and Rumble as well. Definitely go check out Rumble. I'm streaming this one to YouTube. Maybe I probably shouldn't have. I have like another week before my strike completely expires, so I was trying to hold out till I could. But this was like kind of breaking stuff. Plus, I just kind of wanted to touch base with my YouTube audience, remind them I'm still here. There's content you're missing out on over on Rumble. I'll be back in like a week. And if you notice, I didn't use a normal an episode like this. Try to do some sort of cool intro. I just did the old classic No Way Jose intro for this because I don't want to chance it with the YouTube censors. So you never know when a JFK headshot will get it or whatever. So, but definitely go check out my show on Rumble. And then here in a week, I'll be posting more regularly up on YouTube for those who are waiting for that to come back. But always there on Rumble, always there on the audio podcatchers. I do, if you guys, I think I already mentioned this is live. You can tell it's live. I normally do the whole paywall thing, but this is a little bit more like a kind of time of the essence thing. I do this every so often. But if you want to get content early, patreon.com/KnowYourJose2020. It's $2 the lowest just to get the early content, and there's differing levels. The highest being my sponsors. I read them off at the end of every episode, and so I'll do that later. We are covering, there was something that seemed to be maybe possibly an assassination attempt in relation to RFK Jr. recently. Bring on Lisa Pease to talk that if you've only been paying attention to my YouTube content, you don't realize that we actually have a RFK assassination series going on right now. We're, I think, 3 or 4 deep already. We were actually going to do that episode today, and then this happens. So I was like, it only makes sense. And heck, we would have ended up talking about it for at least a half hour anyway, so it only makes sense to dedicate a whole episode to it. But with that, I gave you a guest, gave you a topic. Let's go ahead and get Lisa in here. Hey, Lisa, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jose?
Good, good. This is whole surreal. All this is weird. I've been
Yeah, you
saying
can't make this up, right? I mean, this actually happened.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny. It's almost I feel like because the kind of the way I go into content I want to cover is just literally what interests me, and it's almost like my subconscious spoke to me because it's like weird. Some of my OKC stuff and then the RFK coverage kind of seems to be merging together here because we'll kind of get into it. If there is some deeper story here, it's weird that it seems to be they're angling that the right wing is coming after RFK. If you're going to put it in a very blunt way, I mean, obviously there's a little bit more nuance to it than that. But it is weird, and that's why it kind of reminds me. Okay, see stuff. I've been saying there might be some sort of event that happens soon, so it's kind of weird that maybe the powers that be maybe are trying to get two birds stoned and handle their Trump problem and their RFK problem all at the same time. So I don't
Which
know
is
what.
exactly, by
Yeah.
the way, what the CIA tried to do with Lee Harvey Oswald, right?
hmm
They painted him as a Castro sympathizer and a Russian-loving guy who had defected, and then they not only killed Kennedy, they killed the Fair Play for Cuba committee at the same time. So, yeah, there's a precedent for this kind of weirdness.
But I guess we should probably just go ahead and start. I mean, this has been like weirdly, like borderline criminally undercovered, even amongst like I guess our people. Sorry, I guess maybe not so much your people, but yeah, I mean, really, just the buzz isn't really that big. You're like, this is kind of a big deal, especially when you kind of learn some of the details of this story. You're like, whoa, that's weird. That's weird. So I'm kind of surprised it hasn't gotten more coverage. But I guess it would behoove us to inform the audience exactly what happened and not just assume they know what we're talking about. I don't know if Lisa, you want to give the rundown real quick of what sort of
Sure.
happened, the weirdness that ensued.
Yeah, so I saw a post from Robert Kennedy Jr. saying a guy was just apprehended at my event last Friday at the Wilshire Ebell Theater, which is not far from where I live, and it's about 2 miles from the Ambassador Hotel where his father was killed. They hold a lot of political events. When I go to those events, by the way, they do seem incredibly insecure. Like it'd be really easy to kill somebody at a place like the Wilshire Bell Theater. They're just kind of rickety old halls where there's not a lot of security. Anyway, so this guy shows up about I want to say like 2 or 3 hours before the event. I don't have the exact time in front of me, but early, he claimed to be a member of Kennedy's security detail, and he asked to immediately be taken to Robert Kennedy Jr. And so instead, Gavin DeBecker and Associates, the private firm that protects, I think they protect Jeff Bezos and now RFK Jr., because Gavin DeBecker is a personal friend. And so he's helping get Kennedy protection since the Secret Service won't. We'll come back to that later. But anyway, they instantly thought there's something weird about this guy, and they isolated him and they didn't let him approach. And then they found he had not one gun on him, but two guns on him. And it's not clear from the stories. It sounds like his brother had dropped him off and was there as well, and may have had a second backpack, which also had guns and knives in it, which is just kind of creepy. And so, of course, security called the police. The police came, they arrested the guy. There's a video of the guy being arrested, his name, and he spelled it out for us on his one and only TikTok video made at the end of July. And this is so bizarre because if you've ever been on TikTok, you know that people don't just throw up one video. I mean, if it's like once they start, they throw up like dozens and hundreds, hoping for one of them to catch. This guy posted one video, didn't even film it himself. We don't know who did film it because that's interesting too. Was it his brother? Was it somebody else? But his name is Adrian Paul Espiro. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. Aispuro. The last name, by the way, happens to be the same last name as the wife of El Chapo, who was just released from prison. And in his little video on TikTok, he says something about, look at my name and you'll know what you're dealing with. And I'm like, is he trying to pretend he's related to El Chapo in some way? Don't know. He mentions gematria, and I went and looked that up because I'm like, what the hell is that? And I as soon as I saw it, I knew what it was. It's like a numerology system. You put your name in, and it matches it up with other words that total the same total value as your name. And curiously, it seemed like his name actually matched up with emergency broadcast. And those are two of the words he used in his little TikTok video. He's like, this is an emergency broadcast. And it was really kind of weird. He's in dark glasses the whole time, so you can't really see his eyes. He's at his home, is actually, I think, is his mother's home out in Northridge. Standing in front of his garage saying, come on, I want to talk to the Hells Angels. I want to talk to the Mongols, which is kind of a biker org that became so gang and criminally related that now they're not even allowed to wear their logos on their jackets when they're going out. So he's like trying to get himself associated with that. And then he said, and I'm going to be talking to, 2020 icons, Sarge. And so, of course, I looked this guy up, and it's a weird combination of like new age, space, David Icke conspiracy type stuff, and the guy's former military. There's some really weird stuff going on
every single time.
Yes. And so it's like, it's kind of like a manifesto type thing. And at the end of it, he makes a comment about, at the start of it, he says something about being God's gangster. And at the end, he kind of salutes Trump, our current president, who we know factually that's just not true. And by the way, well, I just want to say I was one of those who looked into electronic voting and all the dangers of it. It is totally hackable, but there are signatures, and there is like sometimes legitimate evidence. I couldn't find that in the Trump case at all. I did look because there was so much stir on that. I didn't see anything that rose to the level of credibility. So, but he thinks that Trump is still our president. And he says something like, let's go kneecap some people. Let's put this planet on lockdown. I mean, really kind of extreme, crazy stuff. And, so you have to wonder. So this video is posted at the end of July. It's now middle of September. So not that long, about 6 weeks later. And now he's arrested. Had he actually shot Robert Kennedy, imagine the media connecting the dots and saying Trump supporter kills Kennedy. And as you said at the start of the show, that's kind of the wet dream for the Democrats, take out two parties at once. And when I say the Democrats, I'm not insinuating the Democrats set this up or whatever, because my strong feeling is the CIA is really in control of the Democratic Party these days, and would not hesitate to take out another Kennedy before he gets elected. So let's draw some parallels now with what happened. His father, again, was campaigning just 2 miles further down the street towards, in 1968. He apparently was shot at least 2 or 3 times, I believe, by a security guard who had joined his campaign's security detail. It wasn't his campaign's personal, it was the hotel had hired extra security that night. They had their own security force. They thought they were going to need extra help. Curiously, the guy who called Ace Security to get the extra help was himself former LAPD. There's a lot of former LAPD guys in that story. And it's worth noting the LAPD has had a long history with the CIA and intelligence. Often when guys come back from a war and they've done military intelligence, hard to get work here in the States, easy to get work in an intelligence unit at a police department. So a lot of those guys tend to have former military backgrounds. And so that guy, posing as a security guard, gets up close to Kennedy, seems to be protecting him, like, literally holding his arm and dragging him through the pantry. They get halfway. Sirhan steps out and fires blanks, drawing the focus. Caesar hits him 3 times, I believe, again, under the arm. And I don't believe he made the headshot for reasons we can talk about on another episode. But it's clear that Caesar was not there to protect him and that his job was to make sure Kennedy didn't make it out of the hotel alive. So it's really weird. And Caesar lived in Simi Valley, which is like one valley over from where Adrian Paulus Spiro lived. He lives in the valley just north of Los Angeles. And I'm not going to give his home address because I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think his family is guilty of anything. And here's the thing. We don't know what his real mental state was or who he even really was. It's like, I do believe that's his name, but was he a Fed? Was he some sort of a mind control victim who got tricked in this? Was he a completely sincere individual who thought he was showing up to help Kennedy, but somebody had framed him? And, it's hard to do the somebody framed him scenario, though, when he has that video posted.
Absolutely.
That video is pretty far out there.
Well, he could have got someone who got swept up in that whole movement, because that's a whole discussion we can get into later between the Q stuff, and then once you get even deep in the Q stuff, it gets into weird little other rabbit holes, parts of it, which kind of like the one guy you were talking about. I believe his somehow is tied into like UFO stuff, and then there's numerology. It gets very out there when you go start going down different rabbit holes, because it's almost like the Q movement was like they had the Q drops and they went to all different. Like, it almost was decentralized, and some people are like, well, I interpret the Q drops this way. And I
No, it's crazy because people tend to believe things they hear over and over. And if they go to these sites and they listen to those videos, they're literally brainwashing themselves, and they don't even know that's what's happening. But yeah, if you, which is why I think it's really important for people to go get a lot of different sources of media. Listen to right-wing media, listen to left-wing media, listen to independent media as often as you can. The bigger the outlet, probably the more dishonest it is. The more viewers they have, the more suspicious you should be. On the other hand, there are these little weird corners which are equally dishonest. So it's hard to know what's happening, but it's also, I don't know, it's not, in my opinion. I think people need new standards of what they consider evidence. And hearing somebody say it on the internet, you shouldn't believe either of us, even though we're both telling you the truth. But you shouldn't believe us. You should consider this a lead and then go verify for yourself some of the information. And if you do that with every video, you'll quickly find out who's for real and who's just making crap up, because that happens.
Yeah. Sorry. So we covered what happened. I can't remember if in there, I believe you mentioned it. You mentioned what his brother's side of the story was, right?
Well, his brother said, because I guess his brother was originally apprehended and then let go. And his brother says this is all a big misunderstanding. He had received a call and told he was supposed to show up for a job here. Well, now again, that's either true or not true. And if it's not true, is the brother lying, or did his brother lie to him? This is what we don't know. There's so many unknowns, and we shouldn't assume anything, because it's very possible that the brother knew that was a lie, but he needed a ride from, I mean, that Adrian Paul, knew that he needed a ride, so he lied to his brother and said he had a job, even though he was planning to maybe shoot Kennedy. He's not going to tell his brother because probably doesn't want to get him looped into this. But it's also equally possible his brother might have even set it up, or his brother might have said, hey, you've got a gig here. Maybe his brother was filming that video on TikTok we saw. Maybe the two of them are working together. There's a page that somebody sent me that was a GoFundMe page from Adrian Paul Espiro. And I mean, it's from the brother. And I'm forgetting his name, but Raymond. It was, his brother's name is Raymond. And Raymond had posted a GoFundMe page saying his brother, who had been an EMT for years, that was his job for many years, and he was licensed, and that's the shirt insignia that you saw when he was arrested. I think it was on that side. It's an EMT logo. And his brother said that his last EMT job basically was to get this guy out of a car who had been shot. No one was there to help him. Some 300-pound guy. He lifted him and ended up injuring his own spine and needing surgery. And then the brother was complaining that because he worked for LA County and saying LA County basically wouldn't help him at all. And so that's why they were setting up a GoFundMe page. And again, that's either true or not true. I don't know. I tried to find out if it was true. If it's true, that's a really sad story. If it's false, that's a great plea for getting money for whatever covert thing you're going to do with that money. And I just don't know. But if it's true, again, it would explain why here's a guy who had done literally an act of life saving and got punished for it. And that could easily have turned him against the system, right? To the point where he feels it's all broken and let's put the planet on lockdown, like he said. And, it's everything we're going to say at this point is some form of speculation. There's only a little bit known. And boy, would I like to be in the courtroom when that guy is arraigned. I'd like to talk to his lawyer and say, ask these questions. I'd like to talk to the brother and see if I can suss him out to see if he's sincere. But I also don't want to talk to him because if he's not, if he's somehow part of this, I don't want to talk. I don't want to get near that element because there are some really dangerous people out there who operate based on what, Q, this anonymous source that I think Q, and I've always thought this, I think Q itself is very sophisticated mind control operation on the public. I think it might have started as just like a test. And then when it works so wildly, I think it's being weaponized. I mean, I think they're building a private secret army to launch. They tried to launch it on January 5th, didn't really come off, but I think they're still trying to build an army. And honestly, it's I don't want to talk about Trump or candidates because that's not the purpose.
I agree with you on the Q thing. I think it's a big fed up. I do think. I mean, I've known people who kind of get into it, and I've gone a little bit on sort of mini deep dives, never too much because I never really cared that much. But there was some stuff, and it seems to be from these Q drops. I can't give specific examples because I just never even really committed to memory like that. But there is some stuff that makes it seem like that somehow this Q character or group of characters or whatever was somehow getting inside information, which was giving some level of truth to some of the predictions or claims or whatever they were doing. So that's what kind of sucked people in. So but it has been wrong so many times in specific ways. And then also it seems to be
say JFK Jr. is still alive. They actually sent a group of people to Dallas. And again, I think the point of that was to discredit the real researchers who gather in Dallas on every anniversary. If you lump actual conspiracy researchers in with crazy conspiracy theorists, because those are two completely different camps. There are people who know what they're talking about and people who make crap up or fall for the craziest stuff. And, by mixing those two together in the minds of the media and getting them on film together, it's easy to dismiss all of them. And I really think that's the whole point of Q, is to make the conspiracy theaters wilder and wilder, and then take down all conspiracy theory, even legitimate, actual theories about real conspiracies. I mean, 9/11 was a conspiracy. The government calls it a conspiracy. Which theory is true, I still don't know, but I do know there have been a ton of lies about what really happened there. Saying, but I'm not going to pretend to know the answer, because I don't. And it's the families of the victims from 9/11 have asked a lot of questions that the government has yet to answer. And I think if we want to know what happened, why don't we start by answering the families very legitimate, good, pointed questions about certain things that they read in the media that had been reported that were never followed up on.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, but I mean, back to the key thing. I do think it's very sophisticated because I do think it's weird that there is some component of like numerology, symbols, patterns. I
Yeah.
think it actually has a tendency to draw in certain people who I guess are almost like your genius level people who start seeing patterns more than other people do. So I actually think it's really sophisticated, can suck in dumb people and very smart people because they
Yes.
see these patterns, they convince themselves of things because of
Hmm.
said patterns. And I was kind of thinking about this. I've actually known this and noticed this in a lot of modern things where if you peel back a few layers, you see there's like these numerology aspects of different conspiracies, which is weird.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think there's something. It made me think of. Did you ever see that thing that happened with Shia LaBeouf forever ago, where a bunch of Reddit people like mess with him? He had this. He was
No.
doing this display. This was I think around the time that Trump got elected, and he was doing this like kind of a art project or whatever thing where he did a live stream with some flag, and I can't remember. It was like "He will not divide us" or something. It was like a chant, and it was like they were supposed to every so often say it, and it was supposed to run 24/7. And they ended up like it was originally like Times Square. People kept messing with the flag and stuff, and so they ended up started moving at different spots around the earth, like around America, to kind of like keep it from people to mess with it, other than people that were supposed to be there or whatever. And
Wow.
but there became this sophisticated thing that happened on Reddit, where it just became a silly game where people were literally
Oh.
using stuff like jet patterns in the sky based off the live stream video and coordinating information like that. And but like these are
Oh
people
my
that are on the
gosh.
internet, extreme geniuses, and they found a way to coordinate via the internet. So it's like it's I could see that as silly as this
Yeah.
story is, like I could
Yeah.
see the powers that be being a little bit afraid of that type of that capability.
Mhm.
So it only
Mhm.
makes sense for there to be ops like this that do suck in those types of characters, those people that are very, because
Yes.
if I had to make a guess on the profile of these individuals that were doing this, probably kind of loner genius types. So that have probably a lot of them have weird beliefs and thoughts and just odd people, probably so smart they struggle to adjust well in society. So
Yeah, that's well
yeah,
said. That's well
yeah,
said. Yes,
yeah.
because
So
I've met
yeah.
people like that. In fact, I think I was at a George Clooney screening of all things. But the guy next to me was a huge David Icke fan. I didn't know this, and I was talking to the person I was with, and I was like, "That David Icke, he thinks we're from this planet Nibiru and this and that, and it just doesn't make any sense." And the guy next to me, he's like, "Oh my God, I've been a David Icke fan for a long time, but hearing what you just said, I realize I should really question that." And it's like they just, if you only hear one side of any argument, that's the side you're going to go with. You're going to assume those people are credible and sincere, and a lot of these people are sincere. I mean, they genuinely believe the things they're saying. I mean, that's what makes it harder because people who fall for the weird conspiracy theories, they don't think, how do I want to say, they don't think critically about what's being said. They think critically about who is saying it, and do I think this is a nice person, a good person, a sincere person. And so if you get somebody who's good and nice and sincere, you'll believe some really crazy things they say because they seem trustworthy. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I know people personally who have been sucked into some of this, and I don't understand because again, they are super intelligent people, and so it's like, how can they fall for this? I mean, my own dentist, I remember, fell for Q, and he's like, "Have you heard this new guy Q and all the stuff he's saying?" He was going on and wanted to read my book because it was a conspiracy, and I'm like, "Well, it's actually history." It's like I didn't write a book about a conspiracy. I wrote a book about history and found a conspiracy. It's like there is a difference, and people who see conspiracies everywhere can be really problematic, as can people who never see
Yep. Yep.
conspiracies
That's what
anywhere.
that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
If anything, that's
Exactly.
almost the more dense position. So that's why I don't really hold it against people who get sucked up into crazy. For one, I enjoy crazy ones. That's part of the only reason I've even looked into things like Q, just because it's like, well, that's interesting. All right, let's see what these guys think. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if I buy that. That's interesting. I don't think I buy that. Like that's just kind of how I approach a lot of these silly conspiracies because they're fun. But yeah, I think these typically are more critical thinkers than the people who don't believe in conspiracies. For example, one of the main crux points of Q has always been about like save the children type stuff, and it's always about theories that
Yes.
these Hollywoods or these elites are abducting children and doing awful things to them.
Hmm.
Particularly sex crimes or
And a
and
lot of people
violence.
in Hollywood are
Yes,
doing
exactly. So
terrible things
there
to
is
kids, and a lot of it's come out in the mainstream media
exactly.
over time.
Yes.
Yes.
So it gives
So yeah, and
credibility.
that's the thing. Yeah, it's funny because the CIA and other organizations, there's white propaganda, gray propaganda, and black propaganda. Black propaganda is wholly untrue and doesn't usually work too well. White propaganda is when you stick only to the truth, but you only tell the pieces you want people to understand and remember. Gray propaganda is where they have the biggest success because it's partly true and partly false. And because there is some truth in it, it's very easy for people to say, well, I know that's true. Therefore, all of this is true, even though that was the only part that was true. And it was put there to get you to bite on it, you know? So I think this is a huge and again, very sophisticated, gray operation. And I wanted to talk, did you ever read those stories about Cambridge Analytics? Cambridge Analytics was working with Facebook to get all their likes and dislikes, all their purchases, all the ads they viewed and clicked away from or clicked through to, because you can make psychological profiles of people that way. And once you know that about people, then you tend to know how to program people. So that level of data, it's funny because in Germany, they already had a fascist takeover and they knew the danger of that much personal information being concentrated in a few hands. So in Germany, sites aren't even allowed to collect personal data. They're not allowed to store your name or address or phone number. I mean, it's the privacy laws are incredibly strict. Here in the US, people are so naive, they'll turn over their passwords to these companies and trust them, and they shouldn't be trusted. So the the rise of like the Cambridge Analytic data and Q kind of hit at the same time. And it made me wonder if there might be some crossover. Like we have this data, we know how to get to these people. They go to these new age sites, they go to these conspiracy sites. Let's get a narrative going that will, pull them through the next few years. And it's like a story. I met a guy once who was reading, it was a site called Above Top Secret. And he was convinced that there was a piece of quartz that had become sentient, a piece of quartz, a rock had become sentient, and that people from like NASA were talking to it and it was predicting the end of the world. I mean, it's like on the face of it, this sounds ridiculous. But because the information had been leaked slowly over time and this guy had followed the narrative, he'd been totally sucked in. He could talk like for an hour straight about this story and this poor you know, alien crystal, basically crystal based life form. And I'm like, oh my God. And at that time, I knew Gordon Novell, who was a CIA operative, what they would call probably a contract agent, never officially worked for the agency, but clearly had done a lot of work for them over the years, shows up in the JFK story and other. And I was just curious because, since it had this whole alien angle and Gordon was really into aliens, I'm like, I gotta get these two guys together. So I did. And Gordon's like, this sounds like an intelligence operation, what they call a vacuum operation. They put out these stories and they see who they can suck in with it because that means they can control them on a certain level. And then once they have them in control, they can weaponize them and turn them against, public figures or, use them as media assets without their even being aware of it and so on. And I really think that that's what happened with Q. Somebody just figured out there's like this conspiracy mindset, which, as we both say, we both see conspiracies in a lot of things, but there's a difference between looking factually at things and seeing actual conspiracies and then making crap up about you know, an alien crystal. You know,
Yeah,
it's
and
like I don't understand why the same people who can see conspiracy in one can't see that the other is ridiculous.
yeah.
And you know,
Well, it takes
all
another
kinds of
level
people.
of you when you start getting into conspiracies and seeing behind the veil a little bit. It takes a while. You realize there are also conspiracies to combat the conspiracies, and there's conspiracies to combat those conspiracies. So, I mean, especially as we were kind of talking about, the sentient life within the UFO community, it is rife, ridiculously rife with that. There's a whole chapter
Yeah,
in
the
in
grays and
yeah,
the
it,
tall ones and the short ones are,
yep.
you know, I sometimes I look in at, you know, especially when I was younger, I looked in on that stuff out of curiosity, but you know, I looked away when I didn't find anything of serious import there. But I do want to talk about, do you know the names Cass Sunstein and Adrian Vermeule? During the Obama administration, there was talk that conspiracy theories were really dangerous and we need to shut them down. So these two academics, Cass Sunstein actually worked in the Obama administration, they proposed a system of cognitive infiltration to try and turn people away from conspiracies. And they're like, we need to get into their news groups, we need to get on their feeds and social media and combat that. And what's hilarious about it to me is they were literally proposing a covert op, a conspiracy to combat conspiracy theorists. You know? And but it was I remember reading an article in the New York Times where it said we should shun conspiracy theorists, put them outside like we do smokers, not speak to them, you know, whatever. And the way it was written, you know, I pulled out a section of the article and I just changed conspiracy theorists to Jews. And I said, if they had printed Jews instead of conspiracy theorists, this would have gone down as hate speech and they'd be out of business. But if you use conspiracy theorists, no one sees that as hate speech because they hate them. You know? And so again, it's like I don't like people who make broad generalizations. Every conspiracy theory is either true or false. And most of them, to be honest, are false. Even in the JFK case. Yes, it was a conspiracy, but only one of the, you know, thousands of theories is correct and all the other thousands of theories are wrong. And so it's not incorrect to say most conspiracy theories are incorrect. That doesn't mean there are no conspiracies.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention with the UFO stuff, what I was getting at is kind of like what you're saying with the white, the gray, and the black propaganda. It is rife with white and gray propaganda in the black or in the UFO community. It's in Wendy's book, Aberration Heartland Real. There's a whole chapter where she goes into like the 50s, 60s, and 70s where they would do what you're because like your buddy said, it sounded like a Fed op where someone
Mm-hmm.
found someone who seemed very interested and goes, oh look, I can look at this information I have. You look at this government paper that I have that has
Mm-hmm.
there's some truth or at least it was fabricated in a way that looked like it was truthful, and then it sucks all these people down these holes. So it ends up becoming so full of feds and then people who are unwittingly influenced by feds, and that just keeps passing. So it makes sense. This component I think has also kind of seems to be cemented itself somewhat within the Q realm as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not all Q conspiracies are alike. Like I said, it's like literally these drops and people, interpret them one way or the other. And even then I've talked to people who do are friendly with it, but they are like, I think some of this bullshit. I think this is a Fed op. So, take
Mm-hmm.
these things and read into it what you will, kind of be like, this is the information. And from there you can go, might be influence for X, Y, and Z. People get crazy with it. But
Yeah.
there's two things I want to mention. I want to play this video, his TikTok,
Okay, good.
but I want to make sure we emphasize. I'm not sure. You may have mentioned it. I may have mentioned it. I just wanted to point these two pieces out because I think they are key to it. He was, for one, the first one was he was carrying guns. He was shoulder holster guns.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they said it was concealed. I didn't really see a good picture to tell, but you can see the
I
shoulder
think because there was one in the
on.
backpack,
Yeah.
so that would
Okay.
be concealed. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not legal in California. And
No.
anyone knows me knows I'm not a gun laws guy. If I think you should be able to open carry, but in California you can't. That's very unusual. So
Yeah.
legality aside, that's just
Yeah,
weird.
if this were Texas, no one would have blinked, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird. So guy shows up with shoulder harnesses like he's in some action movie, and then also extra gun elsewhere on him, and then ammunition in bags and stuff. And then two, he had a federal marshal's badge, a U.S. federal marshal's
Right.
badge, which
Right.
so he was, which he is not one. So by that, I mean that's once again that's also illegal. I don't really care if
That's
it's
a
legal or
felony.
not.
Yeah, to
Yeah, it's a felony,
impersonate a
but
federal
either
officer.
way, you'd think
What
the
we
powers would
don't
be
know is,
interested.
yeah, was it a real badge? If so, where did he find one? Who gave him a copy? Basically, was it something fake that no one would buy? This we don't know. Yeah, but show the
Exactly.
video. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
bring it up real quick. All right.
Oh shit, big homie Zorro over here.
Shit, just the puta I needed to see. More like God's gangster.
Shit, I hear you're the man with the plan. What's the word?
I got it all. Actually, there's too much to tell you right now. So I want you guys to go over to Rumble, check out Icons 2020, Sarge. I will be speaking with him, and Alex Collier. You're not retiring, homie. You didn't fucking ask me, dog. I need you, sport.
Who's he talking to?
Paul, I screwed up.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't know.
First name, Adrian. Middle name, Paul. Last name.
He gives out his email right after this. Yes.
So bizarre.
P as in Paul, URO. Calculate my full name in gematria and calculate my last name in gematria and do your fucking research on that last name and you'll know who you're fucking with. Alright? I need to speak to the Hells Angels. I need to speak to the Mongols. Contact me at STOIC Medic, MEDIC 717@gmail.com. Let's fucking break some kneecaps. Let's go for a ride, dog. Let's fuck it up. Alright? I'm putting this planet on lockdown. DEFCON 1. Regulators mount up. Stay-at-home orders effective now. That's what's happening. Take care of each other. Protect the women and the children. If I don't make it back, call the fucking president, your commander-in-chief, Donald J. Trump.
It just looks phony. It's almost like he's been fed his lines. It's like these weird pauses. We can't see his eyes. I mean, it's entirely possible this guy is a hypnotized patsy who is normally just a normal good guy who takes care of people, and that's why he's a medic. I mean, that is a possible scenario here. When I watch that, and at the end, the Trump thing is almost over the top, it just doesn't ring true to me. But again, if you're a Fed and you're trying to, if you want to find a way to get rid of Kennedy and blame it on Trump at the same time, this is how you would start such a plot.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's it's hard not to look at that and just immediately just, gut reaction Fed. Like obviously
Yeah.
obviously that's just speculation, but pattern recognition is a bitch, and that is I don't know, just that's the like you said before, it's the only one on his TikTok. It was July 31st is when it posted it, so roughly 6 weeks or so prior to the shoot, or not the shooting, to the thankfully not, but to the
Yeah,
event.
thankfully not.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess he could be nuts. But as I said before, I do think this whole Q phenomenon is some big op, and I do think it gets a lot of people caught up in it. But it also, I think, would operate very well as a cover to go, oh, look at this crazy thing. It's not so crazy. These people get caught up in these crazy conspiracy things and do crazy things. Look what a bad
And then
effect
pretty
it's
soon
having.
it's illegal to talk about conspiracies for fear that they will lead to murder. And no, there's a through line to that way of thinking.
Yeah, and it's bizarre, and with the Trump angle, it is the perfect angle for the powers that be. But for anyone who pays attention, actually understands the feel out there, even like with Q people, I don't think anyone really wishes any harm. Like, so particularly from the
Well, what's
MAGA
funny is a
group,
lot of Q
they love
people
them.
like Robert
Yeah.
Kennedy Jr. Yeah, exactly. I have a friend who's been campaigning in the Midwest, and she's like, the Trump people love Robert Kennedy,
Yeah.
which I find hilarious because trust me, Robert Kennedy does not love Trump.
Oh yeah, for
And,
sure.
he distinguishes between the supporters of Trump and Trump himself. He doesn't have any ill
Yeah.
will towards the supporters, but Trump himself, he has a wall in his home. I feel like I'm violating a confidence, but I'm going to tell you this part. He literally has a wall in his home that has all the president's signatures, save one. And he told me Donald Trump will never be on this wall. That's how much he doesn't like Trump. He went to great lengths to collect the signatures of every other president in history, which is pretty amazing. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
And I think, yeah, they are very obviously two very different people with very different ideas. But I think it's key to understand what what a lot of people liked about Trump and what a lot of people currently like about RFK. And there is a ton of overlap. And in a lot of ways, although I think a lot of people come from the right, are obviously coming more from the right with Trump, in a lot of ways, RFK is almost a more honed in version of what a lot of people were wanting from Trump, at least from the aspects that they liked about him, because he's very much, their thing is like, a lot of it's the anti-war stuff, a lot of it's the anti-Fed stuff, or just kind of being a thorn in the side of the elites. And I think, maybe they'd be thorns in different ways. I think RFK is a thorn in more of a meaningful way. I'll be honest, in a certain sense, I like Trump in the sense that he was a bull in a china closet and that he upset all the people that I hated. For the most part, like the people who got, ridiculously upset were generally the same people who are also the same people who are getting, bewilderingly upset by RFK Jr. For a lot of the same reasons. And the funny thing
They're
is
definitely both perceived as outsiders.
Yep.
I remember when Bernie Sanders was running in Iowa in 2016, and people were saying, I'm trying to decide between Bernie Sanders and Trump. And I'm like, I had the same reaction. It's like they're so wildly different. One is pretty far to the left and one is pretty far to the right, but they don't see it that way. They see it more as the outsider versus insider. So I do understand. And I think most people feel like outsiders in their own country because what they see on the media over and over, our country's doing great. Oh, this, that. Oh, yeah, this war is going great. And then in their own home, people are coming home, injured and, from previous wars and losing limbs, and their finances are terrible, even though the country's GDP is doing great. And so there's a real genuine disconnect that the mainstream media is completely missing. And I think that is the appeal of an outsider. And it's funny because of all of them, both Trump and RFK Jr. have some millions at their disposal. They're not poor people, unlike Bernie Sanders, who probably had hundreds of thousands at his disposal. He wasn't a rich guy either. But it's the fact that they're outside the standard discourse, outside the political system, and they themselves feel like outsiders. They want somebody to represent them from an outsider point of view.
Exactly. All right, I have one more video I want to play. It was from the speech that he actually gave. I think that a lot of people might be, I guess I feel like most people probably know, especially from my channel. But I think it's a good example of maybe why some people would want him dead. And really there's way more to this, but I just found it interesting that this was literally the speech the day of. So here we go.
Oh, right. I think I know what you're
when
going to show.
I get into that office, it's going to be, the payday is going to be over for BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And somebody just a moment ago shouted at me about the DNC. Well, the DNC did the same thing they're doing to me. They did it to Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders posed a threat to the DNC's donor base. Well, I am 10 times the threat that Bernie Sanders was. And that's why they've raised, my understanding is $2 billion. And do you think they raised those in small donations? No. And no, they didn't. They raised it by somebody, in the White House basement calling all the billionaires and getting the big money from them. And why they hand it over? Do you think those billionaires and big corporations like Monsanto and Pfizer and BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, do you think they gave those big million-dollar donations to the Democratic Party out of a patriotic impulse? Or out of a humanitarian impulse? I don't think so. I think they think they're going to get something for that money. I think they don't look at that as a donation. I think they look at it as an investment. And
he's right.
I'm going to make sure that they do not get a good return on that investment. I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for your.
I talked to another woman who said that's not usually in his campaign speech. You know, most candidates will give the same set speech over and over. She goes, that's the first time he's ever gone off on BlackRock like that. And it could be because he felt maybe his life had been in danger. He's like, I better get this out while I'm still alive. You know, that this is what's going on. And yeah, no, yeah,
that's the energy to meet it with, though. That is the proper, because at this point I mean, I guess it's either he needs to buck up or just get out. I don't know what the move is now, because I know there's a lot of shenanigans going on with the DNC. They've basically made it so it's basically an impossibility, but I don't know if there's any moves being made there. I don't really know what he could really do. I don't know if he'd really be able to pull up too much with a third party or, you know, running independent, but, you know, either way.
When he first went to run, I was asking myself, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But I feel the same way. It's like, what's the final outcome? Because the DNC is never going to let him be candidate. We know that. They said they did away with super delegates, and then they created a new form of super delegates with a new name. And it's like, it's ridiculous. I don't even want to vote in the Democratic primary now, because what's the point? My vote doesn't seem to count. And I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've never not voted in the Democratic primary. But for the first time, you know, I probably will go to vote for, you know, Robert Kennedy. But it's like, it upsets me if either party did that. In fact, George Washington, you know, the first Republican, really, he said that we should not have political parties. He begged us not to form them. And I think he was right. I would love to see all political parties banned, because then if people are really going from themselves, they'll form different coalitions, and it won't always be with the same people. And we might see some new movement. I mean, I feel like our system is kind of hopelessly broken. And I'm a person who's always hopeful. There's always a new chance. But right now we need something big to change. And I don't see it happening this way. And yeah, I don't know how he could do it. It's like somebody said, well, he should run as a Republican, and that would be hilarious, because he would probably win a Republican primary. But he's a Democrat. He's a lifelong Democrat. That's his heart and soul. And it's heartbreaking to me when I see Democrats going after him and calling him crazy. He's not, you know, or ridiculous. I disagree with him on some things. I got vaccinated during COVID, and I'm proud of it. You know, I think it saved my life, you know, because I get, you know, chest colds all the time, and I didn't need that kind of virus in my life. But, you know, reasonable people can disagree even about important things, and we should be able to have conversations and not be shut out the way anybody who says it was a conspiracy in the JFK case, censored. You know, anybody who says, oh, the vaccines might be dangerous, censored. I don't believe in that level of censorship. I don't think that's appropriate. And yet I am one who would say I would like to censor hate speech, but very narrowly defined. Because hate speech does get people killed, and hate speech might get Robert Kennedy Jr. killed. That's, you know, my fear, is that enough people hear things, say things, they get riled up. And we are essentially emotionally driven creatures. We are not logic driven creatures. Study after study have showed that. It's like you cannot persuade people with facts. You persuade people to act through emotional appeals, not factual appeals. And so with Q, the emotional appeal is, let's save the children, you know, which is a great way to start, because who doesn't love children, right? We were all children. We would have liked to have had a better childhood. I'm pretty sure everybody on the planet would have loved to have had a better childhood. No one had a perfect childhood, right? You know, there's no such thing. So it's an emotional appeal that goes to kind of the core of who we all are, because a lot of us still are the little child inside. But people need to resist that, smell that coming, and step back and look logically and factually at things to make better decisions, so you don't get sucked into these rabbit holes, these ongoing narratives, because it can be hard to break out of it. And they become cult like. And if you start to go down that path, you lose your regular friends, but you make all these new Q friends. But then if you challenge Q and some of the things that you're hearing, you're going to lose the new friends, and you've already lost your old friends. So it's very hard for people to be truly mentally independent. And I feel like I've achieved that. I feel like you've achieved that. It's one of the reasons I like being on your show. You don't seem to fall for everything. I appreciate that. It's hard, though. There aren't that many of us. And so I hope we can help people think more critically about the information they take in, and whether it's even really information or not. Because again, just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's in a nonfiction book doesn't mean it's true. The Marilyn Monroe books, 90% of them are BS. All right. But, there are a couple of good books on what really happened with Marilyn, but they're not the ones that get all the media press, So you have to be super critical and check things out yourself.
Oh, I agree. It's definitely best to come from knowledge from a place of critical thinking. It is hard to do. Sometimes it's fun to get carried away, but at the end of the day, just be a little bit logical about it. You have any final thoughts on this? I do. I guess to close out for me, I would say that kind of we're not really taking any hard stances on this. I don't think.
We don't
I
know
mean, don't get me
enough yet.
wrong. It raises up a lot of red flags for me, but at the end of the day, it could just be a crazy person. But it just seems like such a weird thing that at the very least we should take note of it, and
Yes. And if
just
the
think
next
about
guy has a similar video that gets close to Kennedy, a similar video on TikTok ready to go, we're going to see another pattern evolve, right?
exactly. All right, any final thoughts? If not, you can drop your plugs, let people know where they can find you, your books, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about his father's assassination, but I did spend 25 years researching and writing about the assassination of Robert Kennedy. The book is called A Lie Too Big to Fail: The Real History of the Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. And in there, I talk about the JFK case and the Martin Luther King case, because some of the investigations were concurrent. He's got it. Yeah, wonderful. So anyway, I really recommend you read it, because it shows how the police can frame people. I have a whole chapter on how mind control works and some of the previous cases that are kind of eye-opening and shocking. And in general, don't ever let yourself be hypnotized by a stage hypnotist. Bad things can happen. And read on. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll continue our series here soon. I'll hit you up after this, schedule the next one. We still probably have at least a good few more left in that. I do want to give a big thanks to my sponsors. I have Tower Gang Toad, or my co-host on Tower Gang. You can follow him at Tower Gang Toad, I believe, at underscore, whatever. You guys look him up, Tower Gang Toad on X.com, formerly known as Twitter. I also have, God, why am I losing in my spot? There's my notes. All right. I also have at Abrogate D's. Go give him a follow. I have Kevin B. Clark, a full-time guitarist and private music teacher in the New York area. So if that fits your needs, go hit him up. I also have at ZOVERACK. Then a new one at _Infinite Zeal. Go give those guys a follow. Or no, if you don't want to, but I appreciate you guys, helping me out. Also, go like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. Thanks again, Lisa. I will talk to you soon, and we are out of here.